Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Doylestown Bookshop's virtual event series. This is going to be so much fun this afternoon. So we're very happy to have Daven McQueen with us this afternoon. She wrote The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones. We were supposed to have Rebecca Sullivan with us here, but she was unable to join us at the last minute. But I do still have her book, Night Owls in Summer Skies. I will be raffling these off too. I'm going to check the emails of everyone who has viewed this event, and then I'll email you if you're the winner today. So we have some great books here, some great summer YA reads for you. If you would like to purchase their books, there's a button at the bottom of your screen that says buy the books here. You can click that. It'll take you to our website. You can purchase their books. Daven's going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to pop back in, and we're going to do a little Q&A. If you would like to ask her a question, we have the chat box on the side of your screen, and at the bottom of the screen, you can click Ask a Question, and then type in your question there. Daven, we're so happy to have you with us today. We've been so excited about this event and this book. Daven has her bachelor's degree from Brown University, is that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. And she also tap dances, which is very exciting. So, so that's my introduction, because I really want Daven to talk about herself. So I'm going to pop off screen. We're going to let Daven talk about her book, and then we'll come back on and do a Q&A. All right, everybody, here is Daven McQueen.
Thank you, Chrissy. Like Chrissy said, hi, my name is Daven. I'm a writer based in Boston. I actually grew up in LA in California, but I live here now for work. And I wrote The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones. I also have my copy. When I was 17, my senior year of high school, didn't touch it for a really long time all through college, and then rewrote it over the past year or so with Wattpad books, which was a really exciting experience. The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones is about two teenagers in a southern town in Alabama called Ellison. It's not a real place. And the main character is Ethan, who is a biracial boy. His mom is Black and his dad is white, but he was mostly raised by his white father. And he's sent to spend the summer in this town because he gets into a fight at school, and his dad thinks he needs some good Southern values. And so he goes to this town, but he's the only Black person in the entire town, and he befriends Juniper Jones, who's this oddball girl. Her character was inspired a lot by Anne of Green Gables, Pippi Longstocking, Stargirl, and they go on this adventure together while also Ethan is kind of experiencing racism head on for the first time. It's set in 1955. I don't remember if I said that. My go-to descriptors for the book are racism, friendship, and Jim Crow South. So in this time that I have right now, I'm going to read a passage from the book and talk about it a little bit. For context, well, if you have the book in front of you, I'm on page 107. And for context, this is a scene where Ethan and Juniper have been going on their adventures, and Juniper's now showing Ethan her favorite place in the woods surrounding the town. And she just revealed to him that she likes to paint, and so she's setting up her paint stuff. Okay. Ethan sat cross-legged on the damp grass to watch as Juniper set up shop. She dragged out a small wooden easel and unfolded it next to the brook, propped a canvas against it, and wriggled into a paint-splattered white smock. All of this really fits in the trees? Ethan asked dubiously, craning his neck as Juniper appeared with a fresh palette of primary colors. Of course, Juniper replies with a sneaky smile. I told you, it's magic. Once everything was in place, she raked her hair up into a ponytail. Then, grinning at Ethan, she picked up a paintbrush in each hand, knelt in the grass, and said, "Watch and learn." Leaning back against one of the trees, Ethan silently studied Juniper as she squinted, bit her lip, raised one hand, then the other, and finally dunked both brushes into the palette. It took a moment for it to register in his mind that she was painting with not one, but two hands. Wait. What? How are you doing that? Juniper raised an eyebrow in bemusement. I'm ambidextrous, she said. I could paint with just one hand, but this is much faster. And anyway, having to choose one or the other, what fun would that be? Ethan shook his head. Shh, she hissed, waving her left hand and sending blue paint splattering toward the trees. Art is happening. It wasn't long before not only the trees, but also the grass, the dirt, and Juniper's face were splattered in flecks of every color of the rainbow. But she didn't seem the slightest bit aware of the mess she was making. Every part of her was solely focused on the canvas in front of her. She didn't even seem to breathe. Ethan couldn't look away. Ethan thought he was watching the entire time, but found himself opening his eyes a while later to a darkening forest and Juniper kneeling patiently in front of him. He blinked up at her, ethereal in the evening light, and wondered how he had ended up befriending someone like her. Want to see it? She asked, pointing to the canvas beside her. Yes, Ethan said, sitting up, of course. She held out the canvas in front of her, and Ethan leaned close. He recognized the scene immediately. It was the clearing where they lay, the soft green grass, the brook, the hollow trees. Inside the largest hollow, he could just make out two tiny winged figures floating in the darkness. That's us, Juniper said, but as fairies. Ethan nodded. He thought the painting was beautiful. It was chaotic, sure, and kind of messy, but the colors seemed to explode off the canvas and everything was captured in just the right shade. It's incredible, he said. You really think so? Really. She beamed at him. There was still paint on her face, glowing in the dusky light. I think your freckles turned green, he said, squinting. Frowning, Juniper put a finger to her forehead, wiped off an especially large glob of paint, and smeared it on his nose. I think your nose has turned green too, she said seriously. They stared at each other for a moment with straight faces, then burst into laughter. All right, nerd, it's almost 8. She held out a hand. We should probably get going. She pushed herself up to her feet and helped Ethan onto his. Hurry up, slowpoke. She leapt over the quiet creek, humming the tune of some Elvis Presley song and dancing wildly in circles. On her way out, she paused to lay the painting gently inside a small hollow. Her feet were still bare and caked in grime. Ethan sighed as he clambered slowly to his feet, wishing, suddenly, that they could just stay in this little forest sanctuary forever. The town was out there somewhere, and in it, Noah and his friends, the whispering townspeople, and somewhere else far away, Arcadia, Washington, his family, and home. But here was Juniper Jones, in her muddy skirt, wearing paint on her cheeks like a badge of honor and spinning through the grass with her arms wide enough to embrace the moon. Ethan thought that if the world were to disappear at that very moment, and this was the last sight he ever saw, he wouldn't mind at all. So that was a section from chapter 9. And the reason I read it is, I mean, there are quite a few scenes like this throughout the book of Ethan and Juniper just having these like really special moments of friendship. And part of what was really important to me in writing this book was representing friendship in a very like honest and loving way. I think something that I felt that I lacked in a lot of the books that I was reading as a kid is that like across genders, there were very few friendships represented. Everything had to be a romance. And that's just like not the way I saw things playing out in my life. Like I had a lot of close platonic friendships with people of different genders. And so one of my big goals in this book was to really write a story that's about these two young teenagers, a boy and a girl, but they're just friends. And even though their platonic love sometimes takes on what we might consider to be romantic, just because that's the expected context, they really are like just friends, and it's this really powerful friendship. So yeah, I think that's something that I really tried to have resonate throughout the book is these moments where Ethan and Juniper are just like very clearly in love with each other, but in a platonic way. I think that's like such a special feeling to have with a friend. And I think that it's totally normal and not a thing, especially in YA books, that I see very often. So yeah, that's the friendship part. That's, yeah, definitely one of the most important parts of this book for me. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Daven. So I do want to start with a few questions from our viewing audience. Let's see. Are you able to speak to the experience of returning to something you wrote in high school? Were you surprised by the writing or the content when you returned to it later?
Yeah, so yeah, I returned to this book after about 4 years since I'd written it originally. And it was definitely pretty weird because I'd spent college in these writing classes where I was encouraged to write more literary fiction, and I hadn't really touched YA in a long time. And so it was interesting to go back and just like read myself having written that genre, but also I think reading something in the voice of a teenager about teenagers was also really interesting. And I think that like I really took that into account when I was doing my edits, that like, yes, I wanted to improve some of the writing and I wanted to change some of the plot. But I also wanted the story and like the writing as much as possible to stay true to the way that I envisioned it when I was 16, 17. And so it was kind of almost like writing in collaboration with myself, my past self, which is actually really cool. And difficult because sometimes I was just like, why did I do that? But yeah, it was cool.
Okay, and then another question, what inspired you to write this book?
So the original inspiration, I think the title came first. And it's from an Albert Camus quote from, I think, his book Summer. That goes, in the depth of winter, I finally found that within me there was an invincible summer. And then it goes on a little bit more, but that's the part that like I learned of first, and that really stuck with me. And I just love this idea of an invincible summer. And obviously it was a metaphor, but I was thinking about like what would an invincible summer be like. And I had found the name Juniper Jones. I used to, when I was like driving around my hometown, I used to like write down names of streets that I thought were like nice for character names. That was like how I got a lot of my names. And I'd written down Juniper and like the Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones. I was like, this sounds like a book title. And so I just kind of had that. I didn't do anything with it for a while. And then towards the end of my junior year of high school, I wanted to write like a story set by a lake or a beach in the summer. And I'd also just taken AP US history, and we'd learned a little bit about the Jim Crow era and the civil rights movement, but not much. And I wanted to explore that more, and especially in writing. And so all of these ideas plus the title kind of came together to become The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones.
Wow. So I'm going to come back to our viewer questions in a little bit because I have a few questions for you myself. So what have you been doing to keep busy during the pandemic, and have you taken up any new hobbies?
So I mean, I still have work, so I've been working from home. But I've also been doing a lot of baking and cooking, although now that it's getting hot, I haven't been doing that as much because turning on my oven really just makes my apartment so hot.
Same.
And I also have been doing a lot of embroidery. That's not a new hobby. I'd been doing it before the pandemic as well, but I found that I have a lot more time for it now. As far as new hobbies go, I have been doing some like home redecorating. I installed some shelves in my kitchen, and I made like a pull-out trash can. So
wow,
that's been fun.
Oh, right. And also I want to talk about Wattpad a little bit. I think a lot of people may not be familiar with it. How did you first discover Wattpad?
Yeah, so I discovered Wattpad, I think it was my freshman year of high school. And I'd written before on this website that I think no longer exists called the Amanda Project, which was like connected to a specific book, and it had like a section for writing. And when they announced that the website was going to be closed down, a couple people mentioned Wattpad as a place to migrate to. And so I joined kind of feeling like, oh, like this is a much bigger community. There's so many more people here. Like I was a little bit skeptical of it, but as I started sharing my writing, I started finding community and people who liked my writing, and I continued sharing my stories there all throughout high school. Wow.
And when you started with Wattpad, did you ever anticipate that that would lead to you being published one day?
No, not at all. I remember when I was around that age, maybe like 13 or 14, I was like, my goal is to be a published author by the time I'm 20. And I think I didn't like have a concept of like how young that is.
Right.
But I feel like published author by 23, I'm pretty proud of that.
You should be. You definitely should be. Oh my goodness. And then what was it about Wattpad that you think helped you flourish as a writer?
I think it really was the community, not just the people reading my story, but the people whose stories that I read. I made a lot of friends through Wattpad who I am still close to this day. One of them also lives in Boston now, and she's like one of my friends here. So yeah, I think really having that supportive community and people who like I knew who were excited to read my writing, and I was excited to read their writing, and kind of feeling like we were all part of this together.
Right. Let's see. We already talked about the inspiration for your story. Oh, here we go. Do you have in your book a favorite scene that you wrote?
Yeah. There's a scene that's like a little bit, just a couple chapters after what I read, where Ethan and Juniper are going they're like checking items off of their summer bucket list, and Juniper takes Ethan to roll down a hill that's like her favorite hill to roll down in all of the town. And it's a very short scene. It's only a few pages, and they just basically climb up the hill and roll down it. But like, I love rolling down hills. I actually, in the pandemic, there's a park near my apartment that I go to sometimes. And one time I thought no one was looking, so I like rolled down the hill, and then I like sat up at the end, and there was like a woman with her dog just like staring at me. But I love rolling down hills. And so like describing that was just like really fun. And like, yeah, just like the imagery of that and like the feeling of that was really fun to write.
Rolling down hills is fun, but I can't do that anymore. I'll probably break a hip or something. Okay, so as a debut writer, would you be able to share what you found to be the most surprising element of the publishing process?
Yeah, I think it was really, and I like had some concept of this, but it was really like how involved the editing process was and how many rounds of it there were. And like, I did enjoy editing a lot, but I think I wasn't totally ready for like how in-depth it was going to be.
Yeah.
I was really lucky to have an amazing editor who was really easy to work with and like very helpful. But yeah, I mean, like I had one round of substantial edits, then I got feedback back from that, and then I did another round of substantial edits, and then there was like another round for like smaller edits, and then there were like a couple rounds of copy editing and like fact checking, which, especially setting a story in 1955, there were some like dates and stuff to fact check if like, has this thing even been invented? So yeah.
Right. And so your book involves, obviously it involves a relationship, one very important relationship. And it's a friendship between two outcasts in this very, very small town. Would you be able to talk about the importance of portraying this type of relationship in your story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I spoke to this a little bit, but I think like especially the fact that it's a friendship feels really important to me. But also I think I wanted to write a story about a Black biracial main character who didn't fit in the place that he was. But at the same time, I didn't want it to all be about his trauma. And I wanted to also present moments of a Black child having moments of joy. And so I think like creating this friendship between Ethan and Juniper was really a big part of that, and like trying to make sure that even as Ethan is struggling throughout the book and it is like really challenging for him, that he's like able to have these moments like the one that I read where Juniper's painting like rolling down the hill, and even like just more mundane things with a friend that are able to like allow him to see the invincible summer in the depths of winter, if you will.
Okay. And this is my last question, but we do have some more questions from viewers. Is there one thing that you want your readers to take away from your stories?
One thing.
One thing.
Okay.
That's tough. It's tough.
It is hard. I've been saying a lot, like friendship is magic is what I want people to take away from it. But I think like more so than that, and especially like in this current moment, thinking about like racism and the fact that it obviously still exists, and that, you know, it is a challenge that continues, and also it's something that like we can work in our individual communities and in our bigger communities to fight against.
A timely book for sure. All right, so we have some questions from viewers. So I have a friend of your parents, Jocelyn Slaughter. Hi, Jocelyn. So she says, "Hi, Daven, so proud of you. How did you develop your writing skills over the years?"
Hi, Jocelyn. I haven't seen you in a really long time. I mostly just kept writing. I did take writing courses in college. That was my major. And I did do like a writing intensive over the summer when I was in high school. But I think really the biggest thing was just writing constantly, and also having people read it and give me feedback and reactions. That was like the biggest way that I've grown as a writer. So Wattpad was great for that.
Oh, I actually had another question for you. I forgot to ask. So when you were writing, did you find yourself reading books within this genre to inspire or guide you at all?
I don't think so. I don't really remember. It was my senior year of high school, so I think mostly I was just like applying to colleges.
Right.
But definitely in coming back to the book, I leaned on a lot of stuff that I'd read that's more within this genre since then, and especially more books by like Black authors to sort of inform the perspectives I was bringing to the story.
Okay. So let's see here. This is going to be hard to choose. I don't know if you can. Do you have a favorite character in your book?
Oh, okay. Thankfully, there's not that many. My favorite character is Ethan. I love Juniper. I think she's a lot of fun and like a really sweet person. But I think that like I loved being able to write Ethan's growth throughout the novel, and just like his experiences and coming to terms with his identity.
And okay, here's a good one. So did people judge you for using Wattpad or writing YA, considering that there's an unfair stigma about YA and Wattpad?
So when I was in college, I did take a couple of classes where my professor said absolutely no YA. We don't write genre fiction in this class. But it was interesting because if I wrote about young characters but just did it in a literary way, then it wasn't YA anymore. But I think I don't have a good concept of like what literary means. But luckily, I also had a lot of professors who were extremely supportive of me writing YA and genre fiction, and also just a lot of friends who were excited to read that. And I think like, yeah, people do judge YA, but I would say that like, I mean, I think it's so important. Like, I don't think I would have kept reading when I was in high school if I hadn't had YA.
Right.
And so I just don't really care what people say.
Good. Good. It is important, and not only with YA, to have books you can relate to, you know, that kind of echo the voice you might have. It's so important, and it's been really nice to see. We were talking before we went live. I started with the Doylestown Bookshop way back in 2002, and it's been wonderful to see how the young adult or new adult category has grown so much. It has a lot of growing to do, but really it's quite amazing. And it is important because there needs to be a bridge between children's books and adult books. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
totally.
a very, very important thing. I'm going to take this time to remind you guys that we're going to raffle these books off. If you live locally, once I contact you as the winner, you can pick them up at the store, or I'd be happy to mail them to you free of charge. If you'd like to buy Daven's book or Rebecca's book, although she's not with us right now, you can click the Buy the Books Here button on your screen. If you have any more questions for Daven, please feel free to enter them in the Ask a Question field by just clicking on that down there. Okay, I have one more question here, which is, what are you reading right now?
Cool. Yes, I'm reading this YA book. It's called A Girl Like That. I just started it. And it's set in Saudi Arabia, and it's about this girl who's Indian who's moved to Saudi Arabia, and she and a boy that she's maybe romantically linked to or not, haven't figured that out yet, are found dead in a car accident in the middle of a highway. And so the book is kind of all these different perspectives unraveling her life and what happened to her. And yeah, it's a really cool Own Voices story so far. I'm, only 38 pages in, but I enjoy it so far.
Awesome. There's a question over in the chat bar. Raffle? Yes, raffle. So I have these two books here. I'm going to look at everyone who's viewed this event today, and I have your emails. They're not shared. I'm going to choose fairly from those. I'll write them on a slip and put them in a little jar and pick the winner out, and then I'll email you to let you know if you're the winner, and that's how the raffle is going to work. And then I'd be happy to send whichever book that you won to you. Okay, we have another question here. Let's see here. Oh, if you have decided on your next writing project, can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, I have sort of started thinking about it. Haven't started writing anything yet because that's effort. But I am planning a story currently that's more so new adult than young adult.
Okay.
But it's about this girl who is Black and Filipino, like me, but this is not about me, who moves to Boston for work, which is also what I did, but it's not about me. And she reconnects with her estranged Filipino grandmother, and her grandmother starts to teach her how to make traditional Filipino food that she just didn't grow up with at all. Okay. And I'd written a little bit in college. I'd written a few short stories about access to culture through food, and especially Filipino culture through food. So I'm excited to kind of build that into a bigger story.
That sounds awesome. We'll look forward to reading that. Okay. I think we are good. We have address all of our questions, so we can leave it there. I'd like to thank you again so much, Daven, for joining us. It was, oh shit, pass on the raffle. Okay, no problem, Grace.
That's my aunt.
No problem, Aunt Grace. Thanks for letting me know. Thank you again for joining me this afternoon. It was wonderful to talk to you. We wish the best to Rebecca, who couldn't join us. Everybody, these are great books. You've got some time this summer, so please take a look at The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones and Night Owls and Summer Skies, which are now available at the Doylestown Bookshop. Thank you, Daven. It was so nice to virtually meet you. Hopefully someday, maybe on your next book, we could meet you in store if you're touring in the area.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chrissy. It was great to talk with you.
You're welcome. All right, everybody, stay safe out there. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.